ayahuasca, as you were saying, have this experience of the serpent. And so I think that all of that points toward a sense of self-evolution, that if one is able to genetically modify themselves or witness their own DNA, that there is a hope that you're opening yourself to higher worlds. And so we have one man that, yes.
Thank you. I had one curiosity, and it basically embraces much of what was talked about, like different colors or different emotions called, like also even like the different type of creativity levels and or types of openings that you have. And you were talking about this snake that actually goes coiled up. Like it's a force metaphoric actually like symbol that goes through the whole like chakra system. Is this also involved with the whole trip? That changes your whole, your whole openings more and balances more what that whole balancing of the chakras is. Is this related to what it is also inside of the crown chakra? Is this like part of all of this coiled up in through a message?
Well, one of the things I've always loved about the Shipibo native people down in Peru is that it's the doctor that takes the medicine and analyzes the patient from the altered state with the ayahuasca, and then they look at the patterns hovering over the patient, and if there's something that seems a little out, then they sing the pattern back into harmony. And so it's an altered state, and seeing a kind of art over the person, or perhaps it's their thought form, or it's their perceptual field and the energy field of the patient are interacting, and they receive information from that interaction. So the luminous body, I think, is glimpsed by people who are in these states, and is probably implicated, but it's really darn hard to get to get data reliably from these quote subtle auras and things like that. And you could probably get a few clairvoyants to stand around and watch somebody taking some DMT, and they'd have some interesting things to report. But there's no way to have anything more than an anecdotal result from that. Yeah.
For Mitch and Rick, do you have any difficulty contacting the volunteers from the study, or were there any who didn't really want to talk about their involvement in the study?
Well, Rick had contacted them, and we only got to talk to 10 out of the 60. Was it 60 total?
It was, yeah, close to 60.
Yeah, so it's just knowing that we couldn't talk to every one of them. But the one thing that there was actually Susan Blumenthal, the woman talking about the aliens in there. She, or several people actually, but her specifically, they're a little cautious as to who is this guy wanting to come in and talk about these mystical experiences that we had in a study, and questioning that. And I completely understand that. And so I had to meet her prior to interviewing her and sit down and have breakfast and be able to explain my intention behind that. But once that was okay, and even talking to the other volunteers that we spoke with, they were so pleased and so grateful to be able to come talk about it, because they hadn't talked about it really. And like Susan said in the movie as well, you can't really just go out and just talk to people about these experiences unless they're familiar with them. And so they were extremely excited to talk about it, and also, as Rick said, to share how much it had done for them and meant for them in their lives. So.
It had been a long time. Well, yeah, we started the interview process, 2006, 2007. Yeah, and I had finished the study up in 1995, and we ran a lot of those volunteers earlier in the decade. So yeah, it was hard to track a lot of these people down too. But the ones we did contact were quite happy to, come in. It's interesting about Susan's comment that there wasn't anybody to speak with. About halfway through the study, there was the spontaneous formation of a DMT support group, that constituted itself among the volunteers, because they really couldn't talk to anybody about what it was, that they were experiencing.
I was wondering, you had talked about the future of psychedelic studies and having them be more experience-based. But I wonder if there, is really a way to kind of cram that into a scientific framework, like a Western, I guess, quantifiable results. And well, I also remembered that you'd chosen someone who had had experiences with DMT to do the dose finding. But for the actual test subjects, you had to have people that had no experience with it. And so I wonder about, reusing test subjects or people who come in with kind of these understandings of these systems that describe these spiritualities, but then it's kind of a loaded, context when they actually enter the DMT experience.
Yeah. So there's two questions there, I guess. One question is, how to explicate, to explicate the full, content or the full, meaning of the psychedelic experience in this, current wave of interest in studying these drugs again. And I think it just depends on the perspective somebody's coming from when they're doing that work. I don't think that we can, solely depend on, psychiatry to be on the leader in discussing how these drugs work and their effect and their application to everyday life. I think it has to be as multidisciplinary a pursuit as possible, because the full psychedelic experience impacts on everything. It impacts on art, anthropology, music, religion, cosmology, physics, psychology, cognitive sciences, chemistry, everything. So I think we ought to be careful that we discriminate among the various disciplines and their contribution and their turf. We don't want to overextend, the hegemony of one particular discipline at the expense of the other. In terms of the dose finding work, that was just with a couple of volunteers who had used DMT before. The rest of the study required that people volunteered with previous experience with psychedelics, and it could be any psychedelic. Yeah, only a handful of people actually, came into this study having used DMT before. And actually, an interesting element of the research is that a lot of people were really flummoxed by their experiences on DMT. They didn't expect them at all. They didn't expect alien contact or entity contact. They didn't really expect the vast majority of the kinds of experiences that they had. Terrence hadn't really become that popular by then. Ayahuasca hadn't really, entered Western consciousness to any extent at that point. So a number of people ask me off and on if it was expectation that kind of drove the experiences, but on the contrary, quite a few of the experiences, were contrary, to the expectations of the volunteers.
I'd like to ask you or everybody, like, what would you speculate or what could you see as the evolution of the state of humanity on Earth if everybody had this experience? I mean, to what levels would the fundamentalism be working on? To what levels would the dominator culture be working on?
It's a...
Okay, another part to that question. Well, I don't know if it's tangible to that question, but anybody in general from the panel. Individuals are exploring these states of magic, these states of metaphysics. Have you, in whatever circles anybody's in, how much do you see people using these entries into magic for good, and how many do you see using it for evil? And has anybody been able to get a lot of numbers in there? I've got trying for a long time.
Well, I guess the first question is to, if everybody had access to this and was able to take it, how it would be different. Stephen Hawking just came out with that new book, and he's pretty much said there is no God. And I was
Here,
curious.
Stephen, smoke this.
Yeah, well, I was like, try this. And
It's
I'm curious how that changes shit. It's got to, right? I mean, it would be good to hear that book rewritten, but.
Well, there's no Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, exactly. I think it could do a lot of good in the world. However, I don't think they're for everybody, and I think we need to be. What's that?
I mean, do we want everybody on the world to know about this, or is it just for the seekers that eventually,
Well, I think if people are drawn to them, yeah, I think in a respectable way they should actually pursue those, and maybe there's a way actually instead of opening it up to everybody, that those of us that want to explore these realms, how we can at least be respected for going out there and doing that and trying to integrate it back into life again. And maybe it's just a smaller portion of people that are doing the hard work that can make that change, and it may not have to be the 6 billion people that are residing here. I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that goes against the number one law of moral law of psychedelics, which is you never give something to someone that they don't know what they're getting, and if they don't want it, and just karmically, it's just really bad news. Yeah. All right. We've got one man in the back. Yes.
Is there avenues for volunteers who do want to get involved in legitimate research?
So I stopped my studies in '95. There was a German study that was published a few years back on giving IV DMT, but they're not, doing those studies anymore. There's a group in Spain doing ayahuasca research. In the States, there's a number of studies going on in terms of psilocybin effects, especially with respect to, psychotherapy or for the treatment of, substance abuse. But so there's a couple of organizations which are coordinating research efforts in the U.S. and abroad. One is called MAPS, and also there's one called the Hefter Research Foundation, and there's one called the Council for Spiritual Practices. And all three of those groups have got websites, and you can go online and find out what kind of studies they're either sponsoring or publicizing.
And if you didn't write that down and you think about it later, you think I want to find out more about that, just write to CoSM.org. CoSM, that's COSM.org, and just ask us, and we'll just send those links to you.
I just had one thing to add to that really quick as far as getting involved in the research. I think those of us that are exploring those realms need to start using that as our own research and keeping track of these experiences, as Sasha Shulgin did very well, is like going out there and really trying to put it back down, or at least on some level understand that, and that can contribute to the research. I think if we could start, people posting their trip reports are part of this whole process. Hopefully it's not going to just be in the academic environment. So I would say research away. Obviously, be careful, but I think that should be a part of our research.